Live from the Export Beer Garden studios, you're listening to the BYC, with the team are licking their wounds after expressing hope that the Black Caps may pull off an unexpected T20 series victory against the Indians. Alas, it was not to be. Instead, we were handed our asses on a plate, and Paul Ford especially was made to look spectacularly stupid. But fear not, for just on the horizon is a sumptuous dart of cricket, with the English in town and the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup kicking off with a tough first encounter against the filthy, cheating Australians. And as always, we'll be covering off cricket from around the globe and domestically. So let's begin, and fellas, how excited are we about this English series?
Oh, super excited. And I've just got this feeling it's going to happen between cyclones as well.
Yeah.
So we may get some cricket in.
I saw that there was a cyclone coming in 4 or 5 days. Good news, Paul Ford.
Yeah, look, it's going to be threading the needle. But, yep, okay, let's assume that we've got to assume that the cyclone's going to miss us. I'm absolutely pumped. And I do note that tickets for day 2 of the Basin Reserve are completely sold out. You cannot get them for love or money. Or maybe you could for your style of love, Jace, but most normal people will not be able to get a ticket to that if they haven't got one already. Amazing.
Well, let's kick off, fellas, in terms of the English tour. Yes, you want to say something, Dylan?
No, I'm just fizzing. I'm chomping at the bit to get into this.
With the New Zealand 11 selection at the Tron there, or as I like to call it, the Auckland Aces selection. But let's run through the side. Tom Bruce. Yeah, he's skipper. Eddie Ashok, Jacob Cumming, Sean Davey, Curtis Heafy, Kyle Jamieson, Jared Mackay, Robbie O'Donnell, Will O'Donnell, Quinn Sundy, Sean Solier, Theo Van Work from Home, and Will Young. Thoughts, fellas?
What? Yeah, a good mix of youth and experience. And can I just give us a pat on the back, in particular you, Hoyte J, from last week, mentioning almost casually whether we'd pick Kyle Jamieson if we thought his back would stand up to the rigours of it, and you came in off the long run up and said if he's fit, pick him.
Yeah.
And look what's happened. I don't think he'll play that first test, but he will definitely get some overs in this game, which I'm quite keen to follow on the old live stream.
Yeah, it's going to be, I'm very much looking forward to it. What I'm actually excited about, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, re-spinners, Eddie Ashok. I'm a big fan of his, Paul Ford. I think he's got some real potential. He's a young fella, and he gives it a bit of a rip too.
Yep, I agree. He's very close to the fetish zone for me as well, Jace. And I think he's going to be a real gun. I just hope they just keep picking him, and if he gets pumped a few times, who cares? I think he's the kind of guy we want to develop and bring through in that next generation of spinners. There's a few other names in that New Zealand 11 which are interesting. Jacob Cumming in particular, Craig Cummings' son. He's a gun at age group level. Curtis Heafy's an interesting one. He's a real rock star out of Central Districts. He's been their under-19 player of the year for a couple of years. He is going to be a bit of a legend, and he's one of those ones that they always remember the name. Jared Mackay's an interesting one. He's out of Nelson College, now at Otago, bit of a fast bowling enforcer, so hopefully he can break a few fingers. Sean Davies an interesting one too. He's a Tauranga boy now playing at Canterbury, 29 years old, a bowling all-rounder. So it's a real mix of experience and youth in that New Zealand 11. And don't forget, it's meant to be a 4-day of the pink ball. It's only going to be 2 because England think they're magnificent and don't need 4 days. So it's a bit of an abbreviated match.
What do we know about Quinn Sundy? Because I don't know a lot.
No, neither. Paul Ford?
No, I don't know. I looked up a few of these guys, but I didn't look up Quinn Sundy because, it does sound like some sort of dessert, doesn't he? He's from the Takapuna Pirates, wicketkeeper batsman. It'd be interesting to see. I assume he's got the gloves. Looks like a bit of a baby-faced assassin a la Mark Chapman, although he has grown a little goatee, I think, of late to try and look 19. So, let's keep an eye out for him. He's a 22-year-old. Also from the New Zealand under-19s.
And here's a player that I actually umpired quite a lot, Sean Solier from the Auckland Aces. Handy cricketer, actually. Back in the day when I was umpiring him, he was predominantly a quickie. That was his sort of main strength. But he's kind of developed into a bit of an all-rounder now. He actually opened for the Auckland Aces quite a bit.
Left-handed bat, right-arm bowler, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's got that real bent bat
Yes,
action, hasn't
it's
he?
almost very Snedden-ish. And wow,
Don't tar him with that.
Yeah, no, I know, but certainly some potential. Nice two fellas to see Will Young in there. Obviously, you know, I think it's fair to say that we here on the BYC really back him and rate him as a player. So obviously he hasn't been forgotten, and that's important.
Yeah, well, he's in the test squad as well, but
Yes.
it'll be very interesting to see what number he bats in this New Zealand 11. If he's opening the batting, I think we should all just pack up and go home. I hope that he'll take his rightful position.
Yes,
At kind of a number 4, maybe number 3.
well, we on the BYC Paul Ford last week, we were talking about, for me, straight swap on the test side, Young for Nichols.
It's not going to happen though, is it?
Yeah, happy with that, Jace. But no, they're not going to do it. I reckon he is going to open in this game, Dylan. To be honest, I don't see who else is going to be up for the job. Looking at that squad, so hopefully they're faking you out. He opens in this one and then he comes in down the order. But yeah, if I was a betting man, I'm not sure I'd be putting money on that.
I'm hoping they open with Jacob Cumming and Will O'Donnell. But you're right, they probably will open because they don't know anywhere near as much about cricket as the BYC.
True. Now let's look at the New Zealand Test squad. No real surprises there, I suppose. Tim Southey, the sexy camel captain, Tom Latham, Conway, Williamson, Nips, Harry Nipples, Daryl Mitchell, Blundell, Bracewell, Henry, Wagner, Sodhi, Tickner, Young and Jamieson. What are you seeing there, Dylan Cleaver, in a potential bowling lineup?
Well, I'm pretty certain they're not considering Jamieson for the first test. They're going to let him bowl some overs for the 11 and consider him for the Basin test. That's a word on the street. So I think you can probably put a line through him for the Mount. I think Tickner's probably there as backup. So I'd be surprised if he gets a start. I think you're going to go in with a pace bowling lineup of Southey, Henry, Wagner, and it could. I mean, it's quite exciting. It's what we've been asking for, isn't it? We could have 2 spinners, Anish and the kind of bits and pieces off spin. Slightly better than bits and pieces in white ball cricket, but certainly in Test cricket, the kind of bits and pieces off spin of Michael Bracewell.
It's nice because it feels like, Paul Ford, that Matt Henry's getting a proper run now, and in my opinion, deservedly so. He's a quality player. So Southey, Henry to open, Wagner. I don't know about you. I'm not yet convinced about Tickner. But you've got your 3 seamers there and a couple of options in Bracewell and Mitchell and maybe Ish Sodhi. What's your lineup?
Right.
What's your lineup, bowling wise?
Me, yeah. So, I think bowlers, Southey, Wagner, Henry are locks for me, and then I guess and then it's Ish Sodhi. I think you've got to, if he's in that squad, you've got to play him at the Mount. So, look, I think given Dylan's specific stare in the bounce that Jamieson is looking unlikely for that first test, I think that's how you look. It'll be interesting if he gets a whole, a poultice of wickets in that pink ball test under lights with a pink ball, and that's what the test match is going to be. In the practice match, then it's going to be a compelling selection, I would suggest, and maybe he plays the first and not the second. But look, you've got to have Sodhi in there. Yeah, and then I'm trying to work out how do I get Bracewell and Mitchell and Young into that 11, and it's going to be it would be Nichols. That's the one that gets sacrificed, and I just don't think they're going to do it.
No, Nichols' record at home is actually pretty bloody good.
Superb.
He averages 48 in home tests with 7 centuries. I do think he's earned some runway at home. He just might be one of those guys that is a horses for courses. You go to the subcontinent and you just don't pick the guy. But it's interesting. I was intrigued to hear you mention that you're glad to see Matt Henry getting an extended run on the team. To me, he's actually one of those guys that has probably got more tests than his numbers suggest he should. And again, I think he's much better bowler in home conditions than he is away. But I do look at that and wonder if Ish has an off day, if the new ball doesn't swing, I look at that bowling lineup and think, can we put the brakes? Can we put the shackles on this England lineup?
Yeah, I have to admit, actually, when I first read the selection, if I had doubts, it was in the bowling department.
Trent's a big hole, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
He's a surprisingly big hole in that lineup. He
is, and I'm glad that you mentioned Henry Nicholls' record at home, because you've really been sticking the knife in other chats we've been having, Dylan. So you might just get to save yourself. Hey, fellas, Simon writes, is Gary Stead the least outwardly inspiring New Zealand sports coach of any code ever? Hessen wasn't great, but he still had a somewhat mischievous streak about him, Paul Ford.
Man, this is a vicious question. I'm trying to think of. I mean, you don't really tend to remember really uninspiring coaches, do you? He certainly likes to keep a low profile. Should we put it that way?
Ian Foster.
This, yeah, fair. I did see him buying ribs at Whangamata, actually. So, he's obviously been well fed over summer, I can confirm. Look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? When you think about the way that New Zealand play their test cricket and compare that with the way that England play their test cricket, if you want to say Gazball versus Bazball, I'll punch you in the face. But, you've got this kind of orthodoxy versus chaos, these two contrasting approaches. And I think it's fair to say New Zealand has done well over the last few years by playing old-fashioned, solid test cricket. England are playing kind of, in some other dimension. But, and Gary Stead is the man for that. But you do wonder whether that's been contingent on, in particular, I guess, Anderson being a rock last few years, and Trent Boult an absolute mainstay, and just those solid, reliable runs from Ross Taylor. Now, take all of those out of the equation, and orthodoxy starts to maybe look a little bit old-fashioned.
Well, can I just say before you jump in there, Dylan? I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want a massively extravagant coach. I don't want someone that blows his own trumpet. I don't want someone that's over the top and talks shit. I just want a good, steady, behind the scenes coach. Yeah, I don't need a personality plus in that situation.
No, you did right, and that's kind of what I was going to say, actually, is what they really liked when Mike Hessen came on board. He came on board with a very low profile and a lot of kind of poo-pooing from your Turners and that of the world, who said, the guy could barely play. What's he doing coaching New Zealand? Is for the first time in a long time, the players found a guy that they knew was going to be consistent. And the way he acted and the way he communicated, his demeanour, they weren't going to get down to breakfast one morning and the coach is bouncing off the walls, telling them they're going to do this, that and the other, and the other day was sitting in the corner sulking. And I imagine Gary Stead is taking that to its apogee, that kind of level-headed calmness, which I think they probably appreciate.
Well, quite seriously, though, because we've been up and down in terms of the form of the team and, selections and bringing new players through and all that sort of stuff. I think it's been ultimately a positive that he is that kind of character and that there is a level of consistency throughout the side and in terms of selections as well that I think ultimately benefits the team.
Two ICC finals and a World Test Championship. Obviously, he's not out there scoring runs and taking wickets, but he's central to the cause.
Yes. Well, let's look at the England squad, Paul Ford, Ben Stokes skipper, Anderson, Broad, Brooke, Crawley, Duckett, Folkes, Jacks, Lawrence, Leach, Pope, Potts, Robinson, Root, Ollie Stone. Pretty handy.
Yeah, it's a good squad. I was just trying to think who would likely play at the Mount, and if you look at it, you're probably looking at Will Jacks, and just to follow on from the sappable Australian faces that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Will Jacks has got an extremely slappable face, possibly the only Englishman with just an out-and-out sappable face. Lawrence will probably miss out. I'm guessing Potts and Stone miss out if they play both Anderson and Broad, which they don't always do these days. And if one of Anderson and Broad misses that first test, one of Potts or Stone will play. That's probably the way I'm looking at it.
Paul Ford.
Yeah, look, it's a bloody good team, and you think that they haven't got Archer and they haven't got Bairstow's not in there. They don't have Woods. They don't have Ryan Ahmed. This is they've got some depth, and I guess they're a 1 year into the McCullumization of this team, and after 2 years of being dreadful, it's interesting that they come into this match and there is this huge amount of expectation. They're actually when initially they were playing that really aggressive brand of cricket, I think it was just seen as sort of, ride the lightning, let's see how we go. Now there's sort of this, I think that there's this building pressure that it's going to work every time. So hopefully the bubble bursts against New Zealand. But I think where England are at the moment, they do seem annoyingly happy, annoyingly optimistic, and annoyingly able to sort of go with the flows as they've had players come and go. And it's very easy to say you're going to go out and smash it, but to keep on winning and playing in that way, you've got to be pretty damn good. They lost the Test series last time they were here, so they're going to be motivated around on that front. I think that there are some potential distractions, so hopefully they do come into play. They've got the Ashes at home in 4 months, massive series for these guys. Hopefully that will be a distraction. I think Brendan McCullum being in New Zealand will actually, I was hoping it would be a distraction, but I actually think what that's going to do is it's going to attract the spotlight away from the team, which is going to work in their favour. And then I think they do have this problem. They've got this kind of a bunch of guys on trial, really, because Johnny Bairstow is going to be in this team come the Ashes, and so there's a built-in pressure around, particularly among their top 6 batters. I do see they've been playing golf, so that's positive. As I said before, they only want 2 days of pink ball cricket to warm up. But any team with 1,000 wicket duo opening the bowling, and a bloke by the name of Ollie Stone potentially in that lineup, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Harry Brook. He's had an incredible start to his career.
Yeah,
absolutely goes for it. But New Zealand's it's a different kettle of fish. I do think that England they do kind of play in the moment and they don't overdo their planning. So I think there could be some funky experiments on the cards over these 2 tests.
Waiting. Yeah, I'm glad you picked out Harry Brook, because he
good to watch. Isn't he?
He's great to watch, and he really goes for it, and is kind of really the epitome of what you're looking at in terms of baseball. You know what I mean? He's just a beast, and he goes on the attack. And I tell you, looking forward to the series. I always go with my gut on these things, and my gut's going a little bit about this Test series, because that to me is a strong-looking English side. And, as we've just mentioned, we've had some big losses over the last year or so, and that worries me a little bit. But we'll see how we go, fellas. Now,
yeah, I find it hard to be super confident going into this Test series, because we've already lost a Test match to Bangladesh. We've already lost a Test match to South Africa at home. I think England are a much better team than both of those sides.
Yeah. Let's look at the Women's T20 World Cup. Starts Feb 10th, finishes February 26th in South Africa. God, the reality is, and it was, we talk about the women's game in New Zealand, Wellington just being runaway sort of champions and looking unbeatable. It's kind of the same scenario, isn't it, fellas, with regards to Australia in this T20 World Cup? Team to beat, obviously, and we play them first up, which is a shitter, Dylan Cleaver.
Australia, England are probably the class of the field. It's Ben Sawyer's first big assignment, I guess you'd say, as coach. He took them to the West Indies, where they played pretty well. I saw Susie Bates saying that she's kind of treating this like it might be her last big assignment, so she'll be especially motivated. But they're just, they're brutally honest, they're a step below Australia, New Zealand. You can get funky results in T20. It happens. Sophie Devine could go off, Bates could go off, Melly Kerr could have one of those days. But you'd have to say, if you put these teams together 10 times at the moment, Australia would win 8 of them, and 1 would be a rain out.
Paul Ford.
Savage, but probably true. Yeah, I think I did see a headline that said that Sophie Devine was back. She's been wearing a moon boot as recently as a few weeks ago, as I understand it. She's got has had a stress fracture, but is keen to get out there and play for New Zealand. So I think that's a positive. But yeah, it's an absolute stitch up of a draw. You sort of got this weird craziness as well, layered onto the tournament, in that you've got the women's IPL auction is being held on the 13th of February. So you've kind of got all the players literally on display before the selectors who are going into that auction.
409 players up for grabs in that auction.
It's a very, very strange scenario when you think that we've got games on the 12th and the 14th, and then on the 13th there's this auction right in the middle of it. So you're going to have a whole bunch of players potentially turn into gazillionaires, or at least 100,000-aires during the tournament. It's a stitch up of a draw. Australia first up, and then the hosts. That is tough. The interesting headline that's come out about the South Africans as well is one of their superstar players, Dane van Niekerk, has been not selected because she failed a 2-kilometre, I think it was, fitness test by 18 seconds, having lost 10 kgs, coming back from injury, all sorts of things. So some pretty ruthless selections. The fact that we know her time for that time trial just makes it seem even more brutal. It just seems insane to me.
18 seconds is not just missing chesting the tape, is it? You're a fair way back down.
Do we know what the time was? What time they had to complete it?
I think it used to have to be 10 minutes. It's something like this. It used to have to be 10 minutes, and her time had been coming down consistently. And then they were meant to do it in 9:30, and she did it in 9:48. So fastest she's ever done it in her life.
That's stupid.
Still not good enough, and just degraded publicly for it.
And
seems a bit
the interesting, the culture within that team has got to be put under question now, because her wife obviously is the best player in that team. And she posted almost immediately that, in fact, I think she pulled out of her game. South Africa were due to play a game, and she pulled out of that next game to go home and be with her wife, Dane van Niekerk, or Van Niekerk. So it'll be interesting to see whether that doubles her motivation, or whether perhaps that's Marizanne Kapp we're talking about, who's a terrific player. So, perhaps it's not the worst time for New Zealand to strike them.
Yeah. There's a question here. What do I run 2K in? 6:30. Let's go to Australia and India.
Is that now, or was that in your pomp?
No, now in my pomp. 6:15, I think it was.
Is that when you were running with Nick Willis?
Yeah. Me and Nick.
Yeah.
Starts Thursday night, Australia versus India, and already, lo and behold, pitch looks like an absolute shocker.
Yeah, jeepers, that. So they peel back the covers, and someone snuck some photos in, and it looks like it's been specifically dried out in areas where Ravi Ashwin likes to land the ball. I don't know, is Jadeja still in the mix, or is he?
Yep,
he is.
He's in the mix.
Okay, so yeah, it looks very curious. Australia have indicated they will play 3 spinners, which goes to show you what they think the pitch at Nagpur will do. So it could be a grind.
Yes, I think so. But I love seeing Australians struggle, so I'm into it.
Yeah,
I reckon doctor the shit out of them, and just make them bumps and burners, just turning all over the place.
Well, that's totally what they did. I mean, the only time that didn't happen in recent memory was when England were over there a couple of years ago. They went to Chennai, and they, for some reason, the curator didn't get the memo and turned up with this beautiful green pitch. India lost the test match, and there were a lot of groundsman changes over the subsequent test matches, and they were all dry as a bone and turning square after that, and Axar Patel went through them. Look, it's you've got BCCI curators in BCCI gear putting together the pitches at the ground. So, look, I don't think there should be any there's no doubt about what's happening over in Nagpur. It's going to be interesting. I mean, Australia have got no Hazelwood. Cameron Green's still nursing an injury. Mitchell Starc is out. So I think one silver lining of whatever's going to happen is that Scotty Boland's test bowling average of 12 is about to get severely messed up, which I think is good. It was interesting seeing Steve Smith say that he reckons that the series versus India is potentially bigger than the Ashes. Look, it's going to be a absolute magnificent series, and as you say, a lot of pressure on Smith and Labuschagne. Can they score those away runs that Australia are desperately going to need? They've been practicing at the North Sydney Oval. They've got that oval, tried to India-ify it, and been batting on that. I guess in the search for, they're a bit like New Zealand. They're sort of searching for their Colin de Grandhomme if Green is out. And I did hear the Grade Cricketer, another fabulous podcast, if you don't listen to that, saying both teams, I think, need Dan Vittori, who's over there as their coach. He would fit quite neatly into both 11s at the moment. Look, India as well, Ashwin, Jadeja, they're going to be extraordinary, not only for the wickets, but, those lower order runs, they're so good at just sort of extending that Indian batting innings. And, of course, no Rishabh Pant. He's got in the car accident. He won't be playing. India won't lose. They haven't lost a series over there for about 300 years. So I think, buckle up. The Aussies are going to be under pressure, Jace. It should be fun.
Yes. Hey, the Big Bash final. I didn't see it.
Oh, it's pretty interesting.
Was it?
Yeah.
Talk me through it.
Brisbane Heat batted first, got very, very lucky early on, and then kind of found their groove. Three fours in the first over, all nicked through their kind of slip gully area. But then they posted a decent total and looked to be cruising to victory. Eskenazi, I'm pretty sure he's English, isn't he? Eskenazi, one of the Perth imports. Just a terrible run out.
Oh, I saw the run out, yes, and he was just waltzing in there, and he was about 4 inches short.
Just assumed it was going to the other end. Never assume.
Yeah.
Assume.
Don't talk to me about run outs, Cleaver.
You guys, don't go down this rabbit hole. You two, you've got history.
Yeah.
And then they were teetering, and the surf rack came out.
Second worst run out I've seen this year. Worst run out I've seen this season.
Cooper Connolly, Paul Ford.
Yeah, well, this kid, he's a gun, and they call him the surf rat. He's got a terrible haircut, bit like Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden, but like a sort of a surfy version of that, like it's sort of a mullet, but with it really buzzed up the sides. It's dreadful. They keep calling him a surf rat, and he's really into surfing. I think he was also the captain of the Australian under-19, so he's no mug. Basically just got told, just go for it, mate. Just absolutely go for it. So they were dead and buried when he came out. He was actually batting with another bloke, and there's a great yarn about him too, Nick Hobson, who was a full-time accountant at Ernst & Young. He's taken a couple of days off. He just sort of was working through the Big Bash, and now he's dangerously hungover. And he was the guy that ran out
Turner,
the Perth Scorchers. Yeah, the Perth Scorchers skipper when they were set to win, and so he was a villain there for a while, and then just went nuts. He hasn't even batted this season, and he's pumping sixes out of the ground for them to win the game. So a bit of romance in this story, Jace. It's wonderful. It was a wonderful game. 54,000 fans at that game. Extraordinary.
Waiting. Great stuff.
Yeah, they're talking about it being the rebirth of the Big Bash after 2 or 3 really poor years in terms of television and at-ground audiences. But they had really good crowds this year, and there seemed to be a little bit more of a buzz about the competition again.
Well, let's look at our domestic game, the Super Smash Otago versus ND eliminated. See who plays Canterbury in the final on Saturday. And the women's Otago versus Canterbury to see who plays Wellington in the final on Saturday.
Yeah, see, that's not a foregone conclusion anymore.
No, because they're all gone.
They're all gone.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, fellas. In the Ford Trophy, Kane Williamson caught young Bold Patel for 43. Jason P. from Napier asks, how much do you think both of those guys, who, let's face it, have been shafted by Kane over the years, enjoyed that wicket? I watched that game, and Young was a class above everyone at the crease. What does he have to do to get a game? Well, he is getting a game, and he is in the Test series. So
yeah,
that should be an answer to your question.
I kind of agree with him on the Ajaz. I think you could probably make an argument that Kane's use of Ajaz over the years left a little bit to be desired. But has Kane really shafted Will Young? I think
that's a hard call.
That's an extremely Central District-centric way of looking at the world there.
Hey, what's this? I'm not sure about this. Very important Gary Balance news follows relatively interesting Tangerine Chanderpaul revelation, Paul Ford. I'm picking that's you.
Oh, it's me, actually.
It's Cleaver.
It's Tagenarine, but,
Tagenarine. Tangerine.
I like that you've called him Tangerine.
Tagenarine.
You're having a shocker.
Tangerine.
No. We were talking about Nagpur, which is the home of the Nagpur orange. I don't think we need to keep going citrus on everybody's names.
What? Say it for me again.
Tagenarine.
Pardon?
Tagenarine.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's not meant to make sense. It's a name.
But you've set me up here.
It's a
spelling of it. It's spelt tangerine. Anyway, carry on.
Shifnarine.
I bet this better not be on a video, Joe.
There's no way.
No way that's
Dylan
going on the
Cleaver,
video.
Yeah.
There's no way Dylan Cleaver would write the name in an incorrect way so that you said it wrongly on the podcast. He wouldn't do that.
No.
He wouldn't do that.
Get to the point.
He got an unbeaten 200, his first Test century, becoming the first West Indian opener, aside from Craig Braithwaite, to score a century for a decade or something. Paul will have the exact number, but it was an extraordinary list of openers who have been tried and failed to get a century. Obviously, the son of Shiv, so that was good. But probably more interesting was Gary Ballance, former England number 3, who switched allegiance to Zimbabwe, came in the middle order and scored an unbeaten century. The last we heard from Gary Ballance was when he was called to account for racist comments in the whole Yorkshire racism scandal. So he's kind of reinvented himself back in the country of his birth. A fairly low-key test, weather-affected test, but just a couple of little interesting tidbits from that.
Great stuff. Hey, now we have Music of the Week, the Red Bull Cricket Campus anthem for 2023, straight from Pakistan to you.
Red Bull Campus Cricket. Greatness starts here, baby. सारे मुल्क के खिलाड़ियों के लिए. How's that what it do? Cut from the fabric of passion and youth. Dub pack, tell it suit.
Yeah.
Kill him with the magic I spew. Grow wings and I blast to the moon. Walk like a champion, dad was a boot. Was a pistol, Lil Jiven, Michael Jackson, the boo.
I hate it.
I don't mind it, actually.
How's that?
I hate it.
How's that?
Turn it off.
How's that?
Wouldn't have been out of place in some of the nightclubs I frequented in London in the turn of the century.
Right. Cutting some shapes, Cleaver.
Cutting some shapes.
Yeah, nice.
Stacking some boxes.
Hey, but right now, after that musical atrocity, it's time for Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Yeah, it is. And Cleaver and Hoyte are joint holders of the Oi Hoi Challenge Trophy after a successful foray onto my mantelpiece of trophies last week. Well done, boys. This week, 3 things. There's something funky with one of them. The Whanganui Chronicle reported this week that a library containing close to 50,000 books about cricket will have its grand opening next week before promptly closing again. The man behind it is former Whanganui mayor and lifelong cricket nerd, Hamish McDouall. His own collection, which he started in 2001, has been bolstered by those of family friend Ken Burtonshaw and George McDougall. Lining the walls are books from the late 19th century right up to the present day, written by former players, coaches, commentators, analysts and enthusiasts. He said it is housed in an old bunk room on his Westmere property, which he and his wife have renovated and decked out with AstroTurf. It's taken 4 years to get it like this, he said. Once you build something, it just gets bigger and bigger. He said the oldest book is the Jubilee Book of Cricket, written in 1897 and dedicated to Queen Victoria. But if you're going to pick out the best cricket book ever, he reckons it's C.L.R. James' Beyond a Boundary. Number 2, a host of Kiwi and international sporting legends will tee up at the New Zealand Open for some golf in March. Black Caps greats Stephen Fleming and Brendan McCullum, Sean Fitzpatrick, Jeff Wilson, Israel Dagg, Hayden Paddon, Alec Gunson from the Black Sticks have been confirmed to play in the Pro-Am event alongside the professionals. Also there will be ex-England cricket captain Sir Ian Botham and NFL legend Larry Fitzgerald. Fleming had a completely innocuous quote where he said he was looking forward to the event and said it was New Zealand's best sporting event. Brendan McCullum had an equally anodyne comment saying the New Zealand Open is an amazing week that I love being part of. And number 3, a cracking yarn on stuff about Etisham Shami Ahmed, who played cricket as a boy in Pakistan and then in Sri Lanka as a refugee. The sport has now that he loves is helping him pave a future. His family are Ahmadiyya Muslims, a minority religious sect that is not officially recognised in Pakistan, persecuted, ostracised, ignored. So he ended up in New Zealand, got to Nelson last year, part of a group of 250 Ahmadiyya Muslims. When Ahmed mentioned his love of the sport to multicultural Nelson Tasman, they connected him with the Nelson Cricket Association, and boom, ready-made community. I feel like I'm a member of the city, a member of the country. They treat me so well on and off the field. It is the most beautiful feeling. Great to hear. Sounds like he's a bit of an all-rounder, doing heaps of good stuff on and off the pitch. Great yarn. Cricket rules.
Good stuff, mate. Story one, I can't remember the name of the guy that was saying that the best cricket book of all time, the title's wrong. That he recommend On the Boundary.
Beyond the Boundary.
Beyond the Boundary.
No, it's not.
Oh. Okay, fine. It's going to be like that, Cleaver. Can I change my answer then?
He is no longer Sir Ian Botham. He is now Lord Botham.
The belt is going to Jason Hoyte because it was the deliberate error was that the collection has got only a pathetic 5,000 books, not 50,000. Hoyte takes the challenge trophy this week.
Dadoosh. We'll just end that. We won't do this segment for a little while now. Just let me bask in the
behind the scenes.
over.
I'm going to put the protest flag up on that one.
And particularly atrocious, given Cleaver's an author himself. He should know that. Now it's time for Dylan Cleaver's Obscurity.
Obscure players of the 90s.
And we've moved up from Canterbury, where there weren't a hell of a lot of obscure players in the 90s, to be fair, to CD, where there were only obscure cricketers of the 90s. And today I could have plucked anyone out from this side, but I'm going with Craig Auckram, who is what you probably describe as an angular, fast, medium bowler. Took 33 wickets in 16 first-class matches for CD, including as personal highlight of 7 for 61 against Otago at Molyneux Park, Alexandra. Averaged 35.24 per wicket. He was a lovely guy, Craig, and the actual reason I want to focus on him is because it's not so much a segment on Craig Auckram, but a segment of Levin, the hub of the Horowhenua, where he was born, where he was raised, where he went to Waiapehu College. I lived the 3 worst years of my life in Levin. And
as many people have.
That's saying something.
And it is, I believe it's quite a nice little town now, but it certainly wasn't back there. The most ambitious anybody got in Levin in that kind of period in the early 80s was saving up enough money so you could go shopping in Palmerston North once a year, which is a real treat. You either worked at the licorice factory, you worked at the Haynes Undies factory, or you went to jail. They were your 3 kind of employment options. So I have massive respect for people like Craig Auckram that stayed and did something in the sporting field from Levin, because most, like your Carlos Spencers, your Cody Taylors, your James Tarmow, your Nicky Hagers, your Rebecca Gibneys, you've got to get out of Levin to make something of your life. So Craig Auckram, lovely fella. Now works in Palmerston North, actually. So at the council, I believe he's a planner. Really gone up in the world. So I salute you.
Good on you, mate. Right now, it's time for Paul Ford's Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
I provided you guys with a visual aid because this is the car that's in question in this week's Cricket Violence Corner. A 28-year-old man in New Delhi has been arrested for attacking a Municipal Corporation of Delhi car parking attendant with a cricket bat for asking for a car parking fee, the police said. The accused, Vikram Jeet Singh, has been arrested and produced to the court. The role of the other persons is being verified. The vehicle and weapon of the offence have been recovered. Now, I can't remember what the specific exact car is, but it's certainly quite an innocuous looking car. This was an alleged thrashing that occurred in southwest Delhi. The amount of the parking fine that he was asked to pay was $1.13 New Zealand dollars. So probably not worth putting a guy in hospital over would be my sort of guidance on that one. But Godspeed, get well soon.
Great stuff. Hey, now it's time for the commentary nook, where we pick out great commentary moments We were going to do this last week, but we had a technical difficulty. This piece, if you're a cricket lover, you'll know probably as soon as you start hearing it from the great Brian Johnson and Jonathan Agnew. Hit it, Joe.
Anyway, he knew, this is the tragic thing about it, he knew exactly what was going to happen. He tried to step over the stumps and just flicked a bail with his right
He more or less tried to do the splits over it, and unfortunately the inner part of his thigh must have just removed the bail.
He just didn't quite get his leg over.
Anyhow, he did very well indeed, batting 131 minutes and hit 3 fours. And then we had Lewis playing extremely well for his 47 not out. Agus, do stop it. And he was joined by De Freitas, who was in for 40 minutes, a useful little partnership there. They put on 35 in 40 minutes, and then he was caught by Dujan Walsh. Lawrence, always entertaining, batting for 35 minutes, hit a 4 over the wicketkeepers. Agus, for goodness sake, stop it.
Yes, Lawrence played extremely well.
He hit a 4 over the wicketkeeper's head, and he was out for now. And Tuffle came, batted for 12 minutes, and then was caught by Haynes on Patterson for 2, and there were 54 extras, and England were all out for 419. I've stopped laughing now.
Well, there you go. An old classic.
So good. That was Jonathan Agnew's first summer.
Yes. Yeah. And there's just that wonderful moment where he says it and they sort of talk for a little bit and then they realise they realise what they said. Yeah. Hey, now we love your correspondence. How do people correspond with us, Paul Ford?
Flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs on Instagram or Facebook for the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade.
Now, I believe, Paul Ford, you've got a short tale from the Whangamata RSA.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I'll be quick, but just a lovely moment where I was up at Whangamata. It was absolutely pissing down. There was a cyclone sort of in full play, so I took my son down to play some pool at the local RSA, and I was obviously chatting away to my son, and a bloke came over, a guy called Jeff from Porirua, and he came over and he said, tapped me on the shoulder and he shook my hand and he said, "Hey, thanks to you and the BYC for all you've done for our great game." And I said, "Oh, thanks, mate. What's the story there?" And so a long-time listener of the podcast, and he's got at the abandoned brewery, you can buy a beer for someone and chalk it up on the board out in Porirua, and he's put one up there for us fellas. So big shout out to Jeff, and thanks for getting in touch. Hope you made it home safely from the Whangamata RSA and then back to Wellington. Cheers.
Good on you, mate. What a great tale and a great way to finish off.
Great New Zealander.
Toppa Correspondence of the Week, brought to you by Leader NZ's Lasagna Toppa.
We've got something here from Peter, fellas. Fellas, he says, please stop that horrible habit of pluralising players' names. You did it tonight and you did it in last week's podcast. What made it worse last week was pluralising Aussie names. One of each of them is more than enough, without saying the Hazelwoods and the Cumminses. You already know, but I'll point it out just to be obvious. There's only one Cummins in the Aussie team. There's only one Hazelwood. And in New Zealand, there's only one Bolt, one Henry, etc. I know there are times we could do with a double act, but pluralising, I hope that's a legit word, ain't going to do it. I enjoyed the segment on Aussie player faces. I'd like to add Nathan Lyon to that list. He's a brilliant offie, but he often looks supercilious, condescending and somewhat churlish. I reckon it's time you had a conversation about having a specialist keeper in the white ball team. Latham's costly miss of Shubman is a fine example of that. Latham's handy, but that's about it. And in T20, Conway is nothing more than a stopper. He'd be even more productive with a bat too, I reckon, if he wasn't keeping. There'll be arguments that the inclusion of a specialist keeper will upset the balance of both white ball teams. Fair enough on that one too, but it's worth a discussion. As well as the current off-course substitutes, D. Cleaver and Cam Fletcher, and recent incumbent Tim Seifert, surely Tom Blundell is worth a look. His stats are okay, not outstanding. His domestic T20 strike rate is 125.26, which must rate. Plus his superior skills behind the stumps. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Peters.
Oh, Christ, that was a mouthful. Do we agree? So no pluralising?
Well, I've just been caught red-handed with my Carlos Spencers. And
Yes, you have.
I think he's going to have enjoyed the live-in section of this podcast. It's a fair call. Let's stop doing it.
Okay.
I'll get a whistle.
I don't think I ever have. It's just been you two, but no, we'll definitely stop. Hey, what's going on the bounce?
The bounce is tracking on. The bounce will be going to Mount Maunganui, and we'll be doing specials on the test each day. So if you haven't already, sign up to dylancleaver.substack.com or just Google Dylan Cleaver and the bounce, and it's free to register.
Great stuff, mate. Well, hey, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I tell you what, we are very much looking forward to this upcoming series against the English. It's going to be magnificent, and we'll be tuning in. It starts Thursday next week. That right?
Correct.
Yeah. So we'll have a bit of a pre-podcast before that, but until then, take it easy out there, and thanks for listening.